I'm Jerry Crosby, and I'm here with the Chico Steak Life Sketches webcast, and I'm happy to be interviewing Brian Drummond, who I didn't know very well beforehand, and now I know a little bit better, and that's wonderful because I've long loved his parents, especially his mom. So tell us a little bit. You grew up here in Chico, yes?
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for having me here. I grew up here in Chico. Is the answer to that question. And I was actually thinking about that as I was driving over here, what it was like to grow up in Chico. I kind of think that growing up in Chico, at least when I did, being a child in the 80s and a teenager in the 90s, it kind of felt like Chico was my whole world. My grandparents lived in Chico as long as they were alive and I knew them. And my parents, of course, were here, my siblings. I didn't know very many people that didn't live in Chico, and we didn't usually leave. I mean, we would go to Fort Bragg once a summer, and other than that, we were kind of here. And I think there's something about Chico where in order to leave, you either have to go over the mountains or you have to drive through all the orchards, that it feels a little bit like a world apart from most other places. And so that was my whole life, was kind of Chico-centric until, the end of high school, and I moved on to other things.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned siblings. Tell us how many siblings you have.
Yeah, I have a brother and two sisters, and they are still, relatively close around. My sisters are both married to nice guys, and my brother lives in the Bay Area, and we get to see him pretty frequently.
Nice. And you said you went up to Fort Bragg. Did you do your camping there at McCarricker?
Yeah, McCarricker. As a kid, we would go there most summers, and that was always a good time for sure.
Yeah, I think the church needs to buy McCarricker.
Let's do it.
That's where every church member goes to camp sometime during the summer and get away from our heat
I
here.
think every person in Chico goes there, right? It's just a nice place to go.
It is.
Sure.
So growing up in Chico, what did you do for fun as a kid?
Well, I love sports. I still love sports, really. So I played a lot of sports with my friends, and played in the yard when I was younger with my siblings. Or, at the time, we played in the neighborhood with our neighborhood friends every day. And we were fortunate to live in a neighborhood where there were just a lot of kids. And so until about when high school started, most evenings or after school, we'd play basketball or just hang out, hide and go seek, capture the flag, whatever we did, we just did it as a group in the neighborhood. And that's mostly what we did. We also went to the deer pens. Do you remember the deer pens on 8th?
I do.
And we would walk down there. We lived pretty close, and my mom would bring the leftover bread, and those deer were really tame, and they'd come up and you could feed it through the fence. And yeah, those are really good memories. It was fun to do that. The geese were mean. Geese are mean.
Geese are mean. They will chase you.
They will get you.
They will chase you. And so was basketball your favorite sport? Did you play any sports in high school?
I didn't actually play any sports in high school, but basketball I love. I love baseball. I like all the sports, really. I still like to play.
All right, thanks. And did you have any creek life in Chico?
Sure, yeah. Both in Upper Park, of course, as well as I think really the jewel of Chico is Bidwell Park, right? And that's the nicest thing to have such a beautiful park. And so I never really went much higher than Salmon Hole, but Salmon Hole or Bear Hole. And then also, there's no name for it, but just that little swimming hole at the corner of Valambrosia and Manzanita that they've kind of fenced off now. We used to go there a lot and just make that little hop into the creek.
Yeah, everybody jumps off the little cliff face down into the pond.
There's a little eroded cave on the inside. It was really fun.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's not much of a cave. It's like, you can hide in it and watch people jump from above, but it's not like it goes back or anything. Yeah, it was fun. It was a good time.
Any special childhood memories? Any stories that stand out?
I don't know that there are, honestly. I think that I had a pretty normal childhood relative to what I've learned since then, right? My mom was really consistent in my life. She taught me a lot. She worked so hard, and her example was one of faith and forgiveness, and her legacy, I think, is one of faith and kindness and inclusion, and she's never really needed to be the focus. She's always been the engine that makes it work, but letting others kind of succeed. And so I think that if I really think back, that's the thing that I'll remember is we were happy because of my mom and how how wonderful she is and was as children.
Yeah, your mother has the most beautiful angelic voice.
For us?
I think so, yeah. I love your mom's voice.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, great.
And then did you go directly to a mission? Did you go to school first? Which one came first for you?
So I graduated from high school in June, and then I went on a mission in November. So I did have a few months in between, but I actually sold pest control during those months and got used to knocking on doors and things like that. But, that's a fairly forgettable time. There wasn't a whole lot really to say about it, but the mission was not. The mission was outstanding and worth noting for sure.
Yeah, and where did you get to go?
So my assignment was to the Japan Nagoya mission. Nagoya is kind of central Honshu, which is the main island of Japan. And it was great. I mean, everything from the uniqueness of the people who were so kind and very polite and interested in an American, at least in the late 90s they were, and to the food, to the language, which is still challenging, but is really interesting and I think beautiful, all of it. It kind of goes back to what I was thinking before, growing up in such a place that was kind of insulated, at least to me, from even the Bay Area, right? Like it's a small, isolated place in a way. When you go across the world, you kind of realize that the world's pretty small, right? It only took a day to get to the other side, and everything was different. I mean, all the customs were different, and the culture was so different, and the food was different. And I grew up in a really meat and potatoes household, and I was introduced to a lot of different things that, and it's not just about food, of course, but introduced to a lot of different things that have become a really important part of my life. And of course, just being a missionary, right? I mean, you've talked to a lot of people at this point, and a lot of people who serve missions. Perhaps you served a mission. It has changed everything, right? Your perspective and commitment to the Savior and keeping His commandments. And I mean, all of that, I can't imagine what my life would be like if I hadn't done that. It's become really defining to who I am.
Was there anything that stood out in your mind that was particularly a culture shock or a difficult change? The
culture shock. I mean, I remember, this is a silly thing, but I remember just how different the plants looked. And I'm sure that there's a lot of plants that are exactly the same, but the way that a manicured yard looked in Japan was very different than the way a clean yard looked in Chico. And I remember writing home and saying that I felt like I was in like a Dr. Seuss book or something with everything was just different, I remember the first time I had sushi, and I think people eat sushi a lot more now than they did 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and that was weird, but not anymore, of course. And I thought it was strange that we wouldn't knock on doors, we would just open them and announce ourselves.
Oh, really? So you don't knock on doors in Japan?
In a traditional house. So a traditional house has a sliding exterior door.
Yeah.
And you would slide it open and say, "Gomen kudasai." And it's like, "Excuse me, please." And usually no one was home, so we would just move on. But sometimes they would say, "Oh, no, thank you," or they'd come to the door and have a conversation. At a more modern house, which is most houses in Japan now, an big apartment building, they would have little boxes. You'd push the bell, and then there'd be a video. This is, again, they're pretty advanced technologically, so there'd be a video back in the late 90s, and you have a little video intercom where they could see you, but you couldn't see them. And usually they would just say, "Oh, no, thank you," and just keep going.
Well, and I kind of want to go back to the opening the doors even if they weren't there.
Yeah.
Was that pretty common that people kept their doors unlocked? And when you say open the door, was that open to a courtyard or was that open to the whole house?
Well, in a traditional house like that, they would have what's called a genkan, where it's not a courtyard, but it's a small room where you take off your shoes, and they probably store umbrellas and maybe hang coats, almost like a open coat closet. Mm-hmm. And there's usually something pretty in there, like some plants or something, right? Some art, and then you often would step up from the genkan onto the floor. It's a little step to get into the main part of the house. But safety in Japan is pretty intense. There's really no need to lock anything. So we would carry our bags that had our cameras and our wallets, and we would just leave them on our bikes unattended for hours, and no one was going to take them. It's a very honorable society, right? Like they're concerned about not doing things that they shouldn't.
That's
and I'm
lovely.
speaking in such like generalities. I'm sure there are crummy people that would take your stuff, but I don't know any missionaries that were ever concerned about it.
That's nice.
Yeah, really
It
nice,
really
right?
changes things. That's
It
really
does.
lovely. Any particular converts who stood out for you?
Yeah, there were some really neat experiences. I think that before I received my mission call and assignment, I kind of assumed that I might, even though I didn't have any idea where I would go, I kind of assumed that maybe I'd go to Brazil, which was where my dad served his mission. And of course I didn't. And Japan's a really Japanese place. Like everybody's Japanese in Japan. Whereas in Chico, I think today I've seen people representing a lot of different races and cultures.
It's monocultural.
It's monocultural,
Yeah.
right? Japan's really ethnocentric, right? And so, anyways, about a year into my mission, kind of miraculously, my companion and I started teaching a Brazilian family, which led to the reactivation of another Brazilian family. And then all of a sudden, for the next month or so, 6 weeks maybe, it seemed as though every time we went outside, we ran into another person or group of people from Brazil. And this was in a city that where they build cars. And I think they were there working in those car factories. But I hadn't really met them before. And so for a transfer, basically, we filled our investigator pool with people from Brazil, and we were trying to learn Portuguese and sitting in these lessons with a newly reactivated former bishop in Brazil. And it was really beautiful. And a lot of them got baptized. In fact, there are missionaries, as I understand it today, that are called to that mission Portuguese speaking.
Interesting.
So you could receive a call to Japan to speak Portuguese, which I think would be pretty wild. I imagine a lot of them are coming from Brazil, so their focus will be teaching the gospel in Portuguese. They'll learn Japanese, and Portuguese will be their first language.
And so when you were working with the Brazilians who are Portuguese speaking, did you have to try to translate to Japanese and they translated their Portuguese to Japanese and that's the way you guys communicated? Or did you use English or Portuguese or what?
Well, they didn't speak Japanese or English.
Okay.
And at least most of them. And of course, we didn't speak Portuguese. And so the first thing we did was we got a Japanese Portuguese dictionary. And we had some really painful conversations, just like excruciatingly challenged. And then the ward clerk in the ward that we were serving in, this is in Kariya, Japan, remembered, and I alluded to this, but there was a family named the Fernandez family who had moved to Japan from Brazil 10 years before and didn't speak Japanese. And I think that barrier just allowed them to kind of slip away. And so my companion, Elder Greff, and I found their address that we had for them on the records, and we wrote out to their house, and they were there. And so we sat in their living room and we said, hey, Bishop Fernandez, we really need your help. And they immediately they saw it as an opportunity to come back and maybe to even find some community with other Brazilians, and they started teaching us Portuguese. So we would go to their house for dinner and they would feed us, and then I actually got transferred pretty soon after that. But that's a memory that strikes me for sure. I'll remember that, I think, forever. It felt really like a time that I was guided every day. Like everywhere we went, we were finding people. Maybe that's just what it's like to be a missionary in Brazil. I don't know. Like every day, it's just like, I don't want to say it was easy, but it was, we sure didn't have to work very hard to get those opportunities to teach the gospel. And it was a really joyful thing.
That's great. And it sounds like that first find was a 2-for-1, which was lovely for the Fernandez family. Is that what you told me?
Yeah, the Fernandez family.
Yeah, that is great.
Really cool. It was fun.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. So you get done with your mission and you go back to BYU?
I go back to Chico. I hadn't started school yet. I didn't have any plans, really. School, academics, if my ancestors, not my ancestors, if the people that come after me are hearing this, you should know that if school's hard for you, it was hard for me too. That's probably why it's hard for you. You got it from me. And I didn't qualify, really. I don't even know if Butte College would have taken me. Like, it was, I didn't have any plans. But BYU had started, I think, just around then, a program where you could have open enrollment during the summer. And so me and a couple of friends from here decided we'd go take some summer classes. And so I did. I took some summer classes. And I met with a missions counselor, and she told me what I would need to do to be admitted. And so between taking spring and summer classes at BYU and doing a semester or two at what was then UVSC, now UVU, I transferred to BYU, shortly after my mission. And it was a cool experience.
So what made education and academics suddenly more interesting at the college level when it wasn't before?
Well, I don't want to act like it was that interesting at the college level. I mean, I think that there's something about being young and being with other young people that is important. I still the same way, even for those that don't go away to college, I think being with your peers matters. And I happened to fall into some really interesting people and some really smart people. And we had a great time together. And so there was never a thought that I didn't want to do that, once I started doing it. And also, I didn't know what else to do. I mean, I didn't think I wanted to be a welder or a lineman or something. That's great. Those are great things to do, but it wasn't really what I was thinking I would do. And so education just felt like the thing to do at the time. And I'm really glad I did. I think that education was important to me. And not necessarily for what I learned, although I'm sure that that's really valuable, but just for the experience of being in college and learning how to, all the things that you learn in college.
Discipline the mind, get things done, work with other people.
Sure.
Okay. Now
you're right. No, those things are all very important. And when I think about college, I mostly probably remember the people, right? The people that affected my life. And these are people I think that you'll never have closer friends than your college friends. I mean, these are people that I still keep in contact with, and we're spread out, but we love each other. It's fun to keep in contact with those guys.
That's great.
Yeah.
And especially one. That's where you met your wife, right?
I did, yeah. So that first semester in the summer at BYU, before I was admitted as a full-time student, I took a Japanese class, the one that return missionaries first take. I don't remember what it was called. It was hard, but there was a girl in that class named Stephanie, and she worked at a restaurant called Damai on Center Street in Provo. And she mentioned that they needed a server. And so I was excited about that. It felt, I got to say, I felt something like a real draw to do that. And so I called down there and I spoke with the owner. The owners were the Hasegawa family, Yoshi and Haruo Hasegawa. and their English was really broken. Yoshi's was broken and Harue's was very broken. And I felt like if I could get that job, I could keep speaking Japanese, which I was really interested in, and keep eating that good food that I'd come to love so much. And so I did. I got that job, and it was really fun to work there, and I made some friends there. And it, didn't really pay well, but it was fun. And after a little while, I became the manager of the service staff. Because I didn't speak very good English, it was helpful to have someone who spoke English and Japanese to manage the servers and maybe to help with ordering things and stuff like that, or if there's ever an issue with a vendor. Anyways, one day, Lindsay, my wife, now came in to apply for a job as a server, and she got the job. She got the job for sure. And I asked her out on her first shift, which I recognize now is probably in violation of laws, but you're naive when you're that young, right? You're gleefully ignorant to most of these things. And so she said yes, hopefully not out of obligation, but we've been together pretty much every day since then,
So when you first saw her, when she came in for the job, was that like, dang?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely, I think so. It was, I don't know how to say it. I just felt like there was something different about her.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want to act like I had a lot of girlfriends or anything, but I knew a lot of girls in Provo, and there are a lot of girls in Provo, and there was something that made her stand out. And I think it was more than just her good looks. I mean, there was something about her that I was drawn to. And it was reasonable to be drawn to her. She's really amazing. She, as I got to know her, she'd also lived in Asia, which brought us together a bit. Her parents were mission leaders in Hong Kong when she was in high school, and she was there for that. And we both kind of valued that experience. She was and is an artist. And the way she thought and the way that she made me think when I was around her just stays interesting to me,
And what kind of art does Lindsay do?
She's an oil painter.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And so is there a good proposal story, or did it just kind of come organically?
No, our proposal was the worst. Like, it was.
Well, then you have to tell that story.
No, it's like, honestly, I could tell a story, and I don't know, nobody's going to watch this, but if they do, they're going to be like, that's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Like, I bought a ring, and I was so worried I was going to lose it. I just thought, like, I need to propose as fast as I can. And so we had come to Chico to meet my family, and I just proposed. Like, no good story. We just went for a drive, and I just asked her to marry me. I mean, it's anticlimactic even for this conversation about my life. Like, I would do that over for sure, much better than, if I could take it back. But she teases me about it sometimes. I think that she would have liked it if there was something more romantic or.
Sounds to me like you have a future adventure in re-proposing to her.
Re-proposing. Well, now she better not watch this, or she'll know it's coming. So.
Well, see, then you just have to wait a while.
Now you got to wait a while. That's right. She will forget. That's true. That's true.
And so I assume she said yes, and everything just moved forward.
She said yes, yeah.
Was there any nervousness in meeting each other's families for the first time?
I doubt she was nervous. I mean, my family, we're not. I mean, when she came to meet my family, I think that they instantly loved her. Mm-hmm. And if she felt nervous, I'm sure it went away really quickly. I was a little nervous to meet her family. I thought, and very comfortable with them now. We got married in 2000, so it's been 23 and a half years. But they live in the Bay Area, and I mentioned that her parents were mission leaders, and they live in a really nice town. And I thought maybe I needed to put on airs or do something to give the impression that I'm not a hill person. Mm-hmm. But turns out that I could just be me. They're really nice. And so, no, a little nervousness, but only for a few hours. And all went away. I will say that they didn't eat very much. Like, when I was there, I got so hungry, and I didn't feel comfortable just getting into the fridge. that I went out to their garden and I just started eating fruit and vegetables that was there because it was like, are we ever going to eat? But that's one of the big memories is stealing their peaches. But yeah.
Okay, so you're a peach stealer. Good to know.
Not generally. That was a specific scenario.
And where did you guys begin your family? Were you still in school?
Yeah, we were.
How did that all start out for you guys?
So we got married in December of 2000 in the Oakland Temple, and we were still students. And so at this point, I'm admitted to BYU. I can't remember if Lindsay's graduated or not, but she graduated a couple years before me, and with mission and such, right? And she also graduated high school a year before me. So we started a family. Our oldest son, Sam, was born in 2002, September, so almost 2 years after we were married. And before we moved away from Utah, which was in 2006, we also had our second son, Charlie. And those were really fun days to think about. We both have siblings that were in school in Provo and at BYU and around at that time. And so we, being like the married older ones, would kind of host our siblings that were just a couple years older than us, younger than us, I should say, for Sunday dinner, and we'd always hang out, and it was just really fun. We were really poor. No, it didn't matter. There's something magic about being young and everything's optimistic. And for the most part, everything worked out like we thought it would. You know, we have a great family. Our sons, Sam and Charlie, have both served missions, and I think that's been really impactful for them. Sam, a mission in Chile and the Antofagasta mission, and Charlie is currently serving his mission, and his assignment is in Cote d'Ivoire in the Yamoussoukro mission. And he's having a great time. After we moved to California, we had our daughter, Greta, and then later our son, Milo. And that's our family.
And the first move to California was actually back to the Bay Area, yes?
That's right. Thank you. We moved in 2006 to the Bay Area and started a job there, and we lived there for 8 or 9 years, 8 years, I guess, before moving to Chico. And that time in the Bay Area was great too. Again, I think coming from the perspective that, you know, Chico's just unique, I think, and the Bay Area is unique too, and they're unique in different ways, as you know. Mm-hmm. And it was easy to love living in the Bay Area. I mean, you could say silly things like the weather was good. It was. But it was just an interesting place.
It has its own cultural vibe that is very vibrant and interesting and challenging and lovely. Yeah, I like the Bay Area.
Yeah, and we didn't, I mean, I'm sure there are gritty parts maybe, but we always lived on the peninsula. It's just a really nice place to raise a family. And, you know, I think in a different world, we could have just lived there forever and would have been happy to do so. And, well, actually, you know, even as I say that, I think that Lindsay is always going to get a little bit itchy after a while, no matter where she lives, you know? And this is the longest we lived anywhere now.
So she's a person who embraces change.
Relative to me, I'd say, yeah. Yeah, I think so, right? But it was great to live there. And her parents still lived there in Los Altos. And when we lived in the Bay Area, and we lived in a few different cities along the peninsula, but I think her sisters were all living there at the time, and she has 1, 2, 3, 4 sisters, and her brother was in and out. And so we would always be able to see family, and our kids had their cousins around. And so it was a joyful thing. Eventually, everyone moved away. It's very expensive to live there.
It is.
And our house was just too small, and you know, there's time to go.
Was that part of what brought you up to Chico? Was it just itchiness?
I think so. I mean, I think the truth is that Lindsay found a house online that she liked, and we came and visited it in the spring, and everything's so pretty and green, and the weather was nice.
And she had no idea what she was in for.
And she's like, this is so cheap. And so, yeah, I mean, it was just, we did it.
And how did Lindsay fare her first summer? I mean, we're talking today on a day with 114 degree weather.
I don't remember really how she did the first summer, but I know that I know she misses Los Altos during the summer.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's why we all go to Fort Bragg.
There you go.
We just got to get out of the heat a little bit.
But Chico's been great to us. I mean, my older boys especially, I mean, our younger two are just getting into their high school years. Greta's going to be a freshman this year. And Greta and Milo, who are here with us still now, have good friends for sure, and they're fun kids. But during those most important high school years, I think that Sam and Charlie just found great friends and unique friends. I mean, they just don't grow on trees, you know. They're good kids, and they're stupid, and in all the best ways want to do.
They're boys.
They're kind of throwback boys, right?
Yes, like they're boys.
You know, I remember Sam and Frank going on a hike up the canyon to some secret cave they found, and coming back with a bunch of rattlesnake rattles, and just, you know, what would have happened if they got bit out there 5 miles deep on this poison oak trail. But, you know, fortunately they didn't. And they're a lot of fun. For sure.
I think that's kind of one of the beauties of growing up in Chico, is that it is, even though it's a university town, it is also a throwback town. It is still a take your fishing rod and go to the creek kind of place still.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which is nice.
Sure. And I still really love Chico. I have to say, I feel like it feels a little different to me post campfire.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably true for most people who've been familiar with it for a long time. Not necessarily in worse ways, but just it feels different. And I kind of miss some of or maybe I'm just different, but I guess I miss how it used to feel.
Mm-hmm. Now, in talking about your family, is there anything that you and Lindsay did or that you would recommend to others that kind of helps create that family unity? Did you guys have some intentional things like Monday game nights or things that you did together?
I wish I could say we were really intentional. I mean, we've done a lot of the church prescribed things, right? Those are good. With the Feather River Temple being so close, we've made a real effort to do baptisms with our kids at home. We go most Fridays to do baptisms, and that's been something that I couldn't really explain how impactful I think that's been to all of us that have gone so frequently, and especially to my son Milo, who really loves being there. I think that if you're a sensitive person, then being in a place where the Spirit is so present is going to be beautiful and healing and important and strengthening. And it's hard to see change in anything because it happens gradually when you're so close to it. But I think that I can accurately point to the temple as being a thing that's brought positive change to my family just this last year. Outside of that, I mean, what do? We like to do outside stuff, and we like to watch BYU football games and be really loud and rowdy. I don't like to watch them with my friends. They're not as into it, you know, but my kids are, so that's really fun to do. I don't know. Yeah,
my parents were Utah University people, so sometimes there was a line down the middle of our family room when we were watching games.
Well, that's fun. Actually, I like your parents a lot, so that's good to know.
And you and Lindsay kind of have an interesting experience right now because you're the bishop of a young singles ward.
Yeah, I'm the bishop of the Chico YSA ward, the young single adult ward. And that's, that's one of the most joyful things that I've got to do in church service. There's an ever-changing cast of wonderful young people who are so capable, who could, with deference to how skilled you are, could do this, could articulate their lives better than me and maybe ask the questions as well as you. And everything I've asked them to do, they've been able to do well. I've served with I've had a lot of young counselors in the bishopric, and the brothers that I serve with today are both members of the YSA ward who would otherwise be living in the YSA ward as members of the ward. And I think that the ward council and the capacity of these people, I guess what I'm saying is, and I was telling this to President Meyer a while ago, I think experience is vastly overrated, because if we live our lives by revelation, if we serve by revelation, then why does it really matter what we did before? Because God's going to know what we need to do now. And so I like serving not with people who say, well, what did we do last time, and start there to build from, but rather that say, well, what does God want us to do this time? And when you're young and you haven't experienced a lot of things before, you don't fall back on any habit, but you just build. And because of that, I think that the ward council is pretty effective in that ward. It's a place where people make big changes. It's a place where people repent and get honest about their faith and come to church on purpose and marry each other. And it's really a joyful place to serve, and to be able to be one of the only non-young people in a room of young people. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I honestly think, how am I so old? I just spend so much time with young people, and so I would really do it forever. It's a ton of fun.
Now, did you? Because clearly you have taken upon yourself a joy in this youthfulness. Did you feel that before, or is that a gift that kind of came to you as you started working with the young adults?
I'm not sure if this answers your question or not, but I've always worked with at church. I've pretty much always worked with young people. And so, that's one of the things that's been fun about serving now in the YSA ward, is that when I first was called to serve there, I knew a lot of the ward because they'd come through the Stake Youth Program or through seminary or something. I think that the truth is that it's just always been easier for me to connect with a younger person. There's a sweet spot, though, where, you can connect with, at least I can connect with someone who's like high school to like through graduate school pretty easily. And when I go to visit geographic wards now, I feel a little bit out of place, right?
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Okay, and what do you see in the future for you and Lindsay? Are you even thinking about it, or are you just enjoying where you're at?
I think we're trying to live in the moment. I think that we'll do a lot of the same stuff that we're doing now for the next several years. And I don't know. I think there's a lot to be decided, but eventually I'd like to serve a mission. I know Lindsay would too. I think it'd be fun to go back to Japan. I think it'd be fun to have grandkids. I think, I don't know, we get old, slow down, whatever. I think we'll just do it together. I can't imagine living life without her at this point, and being happy for very long, right? Mm-hmm. And so you just keep going together. Really, I don't really care. She can choose what we do. We'll just do it.
Sounds like you found somebody who really is a good partner for you in your life.
Yeah, well stated.
That is great.
Yeah.
Now, I always ask, if you are considering that your great-great-grandchildren are watching this, or even today's viewers are watching this, is there a final message you would want to leave them?
If my great-great-grandkids are watching this, I think what I would say to you all is to repent. It's time to straighten up and live according to your covenants, and to turn to the Savior. And the greatest joy and hope in my life is through Him and His grace. And so I think that's universal for all of us forever. I hope that you had the opportunity to be raised in this faith. And if you haven't, then call the missionaries and get cracking, and I'll see you on the other side.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate you coming in and doing this for us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.